More than 15,000 people received medical assistance in dying in Canada in 2023.
Modern Hollywood and academia love to portray legalized euthanasia as the ultimate triumph of autonomy. In 2010, Hollywood doubled down on this narrative with the movie You Don't Know Jack, a highly sympathetic portrayal of Dr. Jack Kevorkian that painted the Death Doctor as a misunderstood hero of civil rights. But Hollywood didn't come up with the most effective branding. The Canadian government did. They call it Medical Assistance in Dying, or MAID. They wrap it in the language of compassion and mercy. But if you strip away the hysteria and look at the DNA of the program, you'll find the cold, hard logic of a government that has run out of other people's money. What's happening in Canada isn't a mistake. It's not a slippery slope that got out of hand. It is a feature, not a bug. Canada's program exploded from roughly 1,000 cases in its first year to over 16,000 a year in less than a decade. Today, we're exposing how a right to die is being used to liquidate the right to care. It's time to look at the facts. The socialized healthcare feature. To understand why this is happening, you have to look at the DNA of how we pay for healthcare. In a private system, you sign a contract. You agree on a set monthly payment for a company to cover specific medical costs. For example, surgery, hospital stays, and medication, up to a defined total amount, usually after you pay a simple deductible. Because it's a voluntary market agreement, the terms are fixed by your contract, and the company is legally bound to provide that care. There is no arbitrary cap on the care itself. But socialized healthcare is built on a completely different DNA. It relies entirely on taxation, and there is a hard, mathematical limit to how much a government can take from its citizens.
The way that most Canadians are charged for the healthcare is through income tax collection, and a component of their income tax then gets set aside and put towards the healthcare.
Once the government reaches that ceiling, every sick, elderly, or disabled person stops being a patient to be served and starts being a liability to be managed. Defenders of these programs make the exact same arguments as the defenders of communism. They say, well, if the right people were running it, it would be perfect. It's the same utopian arrogance. They ignore the reality that when the state holds the purse strings, human life eventually becomes a line item that needs to be deleted to balance the books. As David Cook points out in Trudeau's Maid Service, the math is gruesome. A lethal injection costs the state about $500. Providing decades of high-level support, mental health housing, or disability care obviously costs the taxpayers much more. This isn't a failure of the system. It is the system reaching its peak efficiency. The Action T4 DNA.
Action T4 was a covert Nazi euthanasia program aimed at killing individuals who were deemed unworthy of life.
The experts and academia call MAID a progressive triumph for human rights, specifically because they don't want to talk about where this ideology actually comes from. They want you to believe this is a fresh, empathetic evolution. But the DNA of this program was written in 1939. A couple years before the gas chambers of the Holocaust, the Nazi regime launched Action T4. Just like modern Canada, it was sold to the public as a program of mercy for the incurably ill to relieve them of their suffering. They even coined a chilling term for it: life unworthy of life. Lebensunwertes Leben. They used the exact same economic logic we see today. They produced propaganda posters showing exactly how many marks it cost the state to keep a hereditarily ill person alive. Money that they argued should be spent on the healthy and productive population. It started with the terminally ill, then it expanded to the disabled, then the mentally ill. When you remove the right to life and replace it with a right to die, you give the state the legal power to decide who is worthy of a spot in the budget. The DNA is identical. The Trudeau administration gave it a modern, compassionate marketing budget to hide the teeth. And let's not forget the irony that the same people who label their political opponents as Nazis support Nazi policies. The Canadian liquidation.
The Canada numbers are bananas. Like, see, like, this can't be true. This can't be true.
Canada is the global test case for how fast the DNA of a right to die consumes a society. In less than a decade, the criteria for state-sponsored death has been hollowed out. In 2016, under Bill C-14, MAID was strictly limited to those whose death was reasonably foreseeable. It was sold as a final mercy for the terminal. But by 2021, with Bill C-7, that requirement was deleted. You no longer had to be dying to qualify for the state to kill you. You just had to be suffering. Suffering is a subjective term that the state has weaponized. David Cook's research into the 2022 statistics reveals the terrifying reality. 3.3% of those killed by MAID gave their consent because of feelings of anxiety or fear. 17.1% did so because of isolation or loneliness. 53.1% cited a loss of dignity. Even the most enthusiastic supporters of MAID were stunned by the velocity of the increase. It went from roughly 1,000 cases in year one to over 16,000 a year today. Consider the case of Sophia, a 51-year-old woman with severe environmental allergies. She couldn't cope with the chemical smells coming from her neighbors' apartments. She didn't want to die. She wanted clean air and a safe place to live. The state didn't provide her with new housing. They provided her with an execution date, February 22nd, 2022. It was cheaper to end her life than to move her. And it's not just the state that benefits. We have to talk about the DNA of greed. MAID has created a state-sanctioned shortcut for family members who view Granny not as a person, but as an inheritance waiting to be unlocked. This is a program that incentivizes the state to save money and the heirs to collect it. The Blue State Blueprint. The DNA of the Canadian model is being exported directly into the United States. Predictably, it's the blue states, Oregon, Washington, and California, leading the charge. They follow a three-step strategy. The foot in the door. Legalize it for the terminally ill to calm public fears. The erosion of safeguards. Remove residency requirements and slash waiting periods. The rights flip. Establish a right to die that overrides the right to live. As David Cook warns, once you define death as a civil right, suicide prevention becomes a potential civil rights violation. If a clinically depressed individual has a right to end their life, then a doctor or a police officer who stops them is interfering with their liberty. In these blue states, the push is already on to expand eligibility to include mental health struggles, following the Trudeau blueprint to the letter. The goal isn't dignity. The goal is a state that is no longer legally or financially obligated to protect life. The victim stories, the human cost.
Canada as having the world's fastest growing program for euthanasia, and it highlights that we in Canada don't require patients to exhaust all medical treatments before seeking death.
When the DNA of the system is designed for liquidation, the individual is no longer a soul to be saved. They are a file to be closed. Look at Christine Gauthier, a Canadian Army veteran and Paralympian. She struggled for 5 years to get a wheelchair lift. A caseworker told her in writing, "If you're so desperate, madam, we can provide you with medical assistance in dying now." Then there is Amir Farsood, a 54-year-old man with a back injury. He applied for MAID because he was about to be homeless. He famously said, "I don't want to die, but I don't want to be homeless more than I don't want to die." The state simply waited for him to sign his own death warrant because it solved their housing problem for $500. Consider this irony. Canada outlawed capital punishment in 1976 because they decided it was inhumane to execute murderers. Yet today, that same government is perfectly willing to facilitate the execution of its inconvenient citizens. The state treats a serial killer with more humanity than a veteran in a wheelchair. This is the DNA of disposability. It takes people at their lowest moment, and instead of offering a hand up, it offers the worst way out. The resolution. Supporters of euthanasia often dismiss their opponents as being influenced by Christianity. And, to a certain extent, they are right. In the Judeo-Christian worldview, life is a gift from God. Because you didn't create your life, you don't have the authority to destroy it. And the state certainly doesn't have the authority to help you do it. This is the foundation of the right to live. It is a recognition that there is a power higher than the government. But as we saw with communism, when you remove God from the DNA of a society, there is no limit to the godlessness that follows. When the state becomes the highest authority, it begins to play God. It decides who is worthy of care and who is an unnecessary expense. This is the true DNA of Trudeau's maid service. It takes the lonely, the poor, and the disabled and tells them their lives are a burden the state is willing to solve with a needle. Thomas Jefferson once wrote that the care of human life and happiness is the only legitimate object of good government. When a government facilitates death instead of life, it has lost its legitimacy. It's time to look at the facts, read the DNA, and demand our right to live.